So in circling, we're really exploring what it's like to be ourselves, and what it's like for the other that we're with. If we're really present and we dare to show up, we dare to be real or honest, or we dare to be authentic, which is not an easy thing. Like, in some ways, it's like, yeah, being authentic, how can we not be authentic? There's one way that we're always being who we are. But actually, what we're pointing to in the practice is we're not always aware of what is deeply happening in us. So in this moment, you might feel like you're being authentic, but then you didn't realize that on a deeper level you were feeling an emotion that you weren't aware of, or you're in a kind of psychological pattern that you developed as a child that you didn't realize you're still inside of. So you might be being honest, but you might not actually being as deeply authentic as you realize. So in this practice, we dare to look at like what's really happening in us, and are we being as real as we think we are? Which I think you all know is an vulnerable question to ask. Like, is there parts of me that I'm not actually able to feel or show up with? Is there a way I'm actually hiding when I think I'm sharing who I am? Or are there potentials still in me that are dormant that just haven't been activated yet? And then there's this part of circling, which is not just being real, but being present. And this seems to be this like master capacity that meditation and therapy and coaching all use. It's this discovery that if we really pay attention to the felt sense or the immediacy of experience, that there's a richness, or there's a reality that can start to open up to us if we become more able to stay with what's here. We start discovering that there's actually an inside to experience. And that inside will start to disclose or show us different potentials or different intelligences or different awarenesses of what life and who we really are. And then what we found with circling is it's this intention to what happens if we be really real together, which is already vulnerable, and then at the same time we be more present, which is also this difficult capacity that usually you only like utilize in difficult practices like meditation. It might not be difficult for you, but it's certainly difficult for me. I spent many hours with aching bones and like distracted thoughts, and like it's really not an easy practice. But then I found with circling that if we are present with each other while we attempt to be real or authentic, there's an alchemy that happens. And I think this alchemy happens for two reasons. I think the presence enhances our capacity to be real, and being real actually enhances our capacity to be present. So we get this exponential effect that the more we're being vulnerable and real, the more able we are to be present to our experience. The more we're able to be present to our experience, the more real and the more authentic we can be. And there's this like positive feedback loop. And I think everyone here has experienced that moment where you're looking in someone's eyes and all you're doing is looking into their eyes, and suddenly you're like having this altered state of consciousness and you feel like you've been smoking marijuana or something, and suddenly you can feel feelings, and it feels like you can feel their feelings, and like all these kind of new capacities come online. This intuitive knowing comes online. So we were doing this practice, but the thing that we always had was a sense of, if we discover something that feels deeply true while being in this like present connection with others, we're going to trust that and really try and embody that in our lives and follow it. Like, if this is a more authentic real experience that we discover in practice, then we're going to want to align our lives to what we discover. We don't want to go back to like, okay, now I'm back in normal mode, and like that was practice and this is life. It's like, no, if this is practice is showing us deeper levels of what's here, let's follow that. So then we ended up leading workshops in circling, which we never planned. We just did circling so much that people started to recognize what we did, and we got invited to do events. But after a while doing circling, something happened where we would do circles, which are these small group practices, and then we would invite everyone back into to like be as a big group. And then we would say like, oh, does anyone have any questions about the circles you've been in? Does anyone want to like share or ask questions about what happened? And there was something about doing that didn't seem quite right. It was like, here we were in this practice where we were really exploring what it was like to be authentic and to be present together. And then we would like call everyone in, and then we would have this kind of question and answer kind of thing, where we were the ones who knew how to answer the questions, and everyone was just like sharing their experiences, but their experiences of what happened 20 minutes before. And then there's this energy of like, everyone, do we have to listen to what people say all the time? And not everyone says things that's that interesting. And so there's a whole thing going on that we could sense, but we were like just so used to that format inside a workshop. So then we just started to say to each other like, well, what happens if we were really like in the practice still when the group comes in? So then we challenged each other to do that. And then obviously what would happen, everyone would come in and we didn't actually have an authentic question to ask them, or we didn't really want to ask them what did they experience 10 minutes ago. We started to go into a deep silence. And suddenly we could feel a potency in the group that we didn't normally feel. It was like, oh, if we really wait, and if we feel that sense of like, we don't know what we're going to say, we're actually going to wait for something that's deeply honest. It was like, suddenly it was like there was an aliveness that was like, oh my God. But it was also like, oh, can we stay in this? Like, aren't people going to get pissed off with us? Like, they've paid to come and do this practice, and now we're just sat here doing, not saying anything. But it was obvious that was also part of a patterning inside of us, a kind of expectation to show up a certain way. And then when we like went deeper to the authenticity, we wouldn't say something until we're ready. And then all this kind of stuff started to happen, not only this presence in the room, but actually people started to be real in a way where they weren't trying to be real. So some people might be complaining like, what the hell are you guys doing? Or others would be like, no, I don't know what they're doing, but this feels amazing. What's going on? I can't, it's like, there's amazing presence here. And then someone else would be like, I can't feel that. What's wrong with me? And someone would be vulnerable and like, and then someone else would come in and be like, oh, I can feel you. Like, what's happening? And then suddenly there would be a connection. And we were suddenly exploring all these deep themes around connection and leadership and what it meant to be in the group. And there was an excitement that was actually even more potent than these smaller birthday circles we were doing, these smaller explorations in small groups. So then slowly but surely we dared to do that more and more. And then I think within a year, all of our trainings had been transformed from most of the time we spent in a big group. And then occasionally we did these small groups just to practice some of the capacities that were important to being in the big group. And it was after being in that for a while that I started to like, what is this thing that happens when we let go of our normal way of leading and we start to listen as leaders to what's emergent in the group or what's really present. and start to show up from our truest authenticity. It wasn't not leading. It wasn't like, oh, let's just sit here and see what goes. It was like, no, what's our most truest leadership? Like, what are the things we really want to say? What's deeply meaningful for us? But also, can we be more impacted and more awake to what's happening in the group? And that's where things started to get a little bit crazy and meaningful and deep and difficult. I think all of you that I know here have had experiences of what happens in the group when a leader is willing to share their context, willing to share their truth of what the practice is, but then goes into a deep listening with the group and is willing to show up authentically with the group and encourage this interconnective exploration, this willingness to be in the collective intelligence. It's like everyone in the group, as soon as the leader is willing to let go like that or surrender in, automatically everyone has leadership choices to make. Like if no one's giving a direction from a pre-planned thing, if it's like we're going to explore what's here and allow what's between us to guide us, then everyone suddenly has this choice, like, should I show up and contribute? Should I just be quiet and find out what's happening more clearly in myself and not put it out on the group? Should I share what struggles I'm having? Should I show more of myself in my embodiment, not just my words and my thinking? Can I embody more of who I am while I'm with this group? Should we stay as a big group, or should we split off into small groups or more spontaneous things that can emerge? And it's those decisions that I think help reveal deeper parts of us. And I'm sure you've had the experience where you're in a group and you think it's going well, and you're like present and you can feel what's going on, you feel connected, and then suddenly someone shows up in a way that's like, what the, it like hits you so hard. And it might be because they show up in a way that you've not shown up in before, and suddenly you feel shame or you feel love, and then you're surprised at feeling love, and then you notice yourself suppress it, and like things can just happen so fast. And then suddenly you're in this dilemma, like, as I so often was, like that thing of like someone showing a new potential, especially in the beginning, I would be like, oh, I'm supposed to be the leader. I'm supposed to be able to feel that potential as well, but I can't, or I've never been where they are. And surely as a leader, I should be able to go everywhere everyone goes. So then I was straight away putting self-pressure on myself, going straight into shame, but it would happen so fast I wouldn't realize. I would be just straight away into the shame, and I wasn't able to own that experience and be like, yeah, I'm not feeling okay as a leader. So it took me a while to be able to notice where I was getting triggered into shame, and then to notice that actually it was my self-image of what it was to be a leader that was being touched, and that people were actually giving me chances to feel parts of myself that I couldn't feel as strong as they could at that time. And there were other emergent potentials that started to happen as well, where we would start to have these spontaneous constellations where suddenly, like, what was happening in my life, the big ethical dilemmas in my life or in other people's, was suddenly like very real and potent in the group. These impossible problems that people would find themselves in, with conflict with 3 or 4 other people at the same time, and then the group's trying to resolve it but making it worse with everything they say, and then suddenly it's like the whole group's enmeshed in this chaotic web of dynamics and triggers and like people trying to take control, people withdrawing, and it's like, surely this is going to be the end of this. Like, there's no way anyone's going to be happy about being in this practice when we're just in this chaos. And then suddenly, bit by bit, someone shows a bit more vulnerability. Someone brings a perspective where someone feels deeply seen, and then they relax, and then someone else suddenly can embody an emotion or an experience that resonates with others, and suddenly there's this deep connection starts to emerge out of the chaos. And there's something about interconnectivity that will take us to further edges of chaos and uncertainty and unknown, that will then take us to deeper levels of integration and senses of connection or group communion that we don't normally have access to.